Thank you for listening. This episode has been brought to you by the Lewis and Henderson Real Estate Team of Aspen Snowmass Sotheby's International Realty.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of She Brands the Land, where land meets legacy. I'm your host, Charlie Henderson. And today I'm super excited for my guest, Connor Coleman. Welcome, Connor. It's so good to have you on the show.
Charlie, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation we're going to embark on.
Yeah. So we met at an equine education series or seminar that I was part of at the Hoffman Hotel, and that was 2024. And Connor and I instantly hit it off. He gave me his card and he said he'd like to be involved in some way. The equine education series kind of hit a pause for a bit. And then a year later, last year, 2025, I saw you at the Windwalkers Derby party and we reconnected. And at that point, I think you were flying off to go to do the King Ranch Management Certification Program, correct?
Correct.
And what is, so tell the audience a little bit about that, because you'll know, like I'll tie it in a bit later.
Yeah. So at that time, the King Ranch Institute for Ranch Management is a program that was developed down in South Texas by the King Ranch. I want to say on their 200th anniversary or something, 150th anniversary. It's one of the oldest and largest, most well-known ranches in the country, and they partnered with Texas A&M Kingsville to develop this educational program. And they've got two aspects of it: the master's degree program, where you can get a master's of science in ranch management, or there's also a certificate program, which is what I did. And so you attend a certain number of educational classes and then symposia. And when we had met, I'd already completed it, but I really enjoyed the educational series that they put on. And so I continued to participate in their classes. And the one I was going to right after we saw each other last year was actually their equine management program. So that was very timely for our kind of reconnection there and around the Derby, and learned a ton about horses, especially the American quarter horse as it pertains to ranching.
Cool. Cool. All right. Well, as is customary on my show, I ask my opening question is, were you born in the Valley? And if you weren't born here, when did you come here and where did you come from?
So I was not born in the Valley. I've been here, though. This is my 15th year here in the Roaring Fork Valley in Colorado. Believe it or not, I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, just outside of the city, and took off to North Carolina for college, and then stayed down there for graduate school and some work, different occupations. But knew I wanted to come west, knew I wanted to work on large-scale private lands. And to do that, that meant ranching. And so I had an opportunity to move to the east slope of Colorado, the high plains there, to work at the 87,000 acre Chico Basin Ranch, which is owned by the state land board, but at the time was being run by ranch lands. So I worked there for a bit, and then had an opportunity to go to their sister ranch in the San Luis Valley, the Medno Zapata Ranch, which is even bigger. It's 103,000 acres, and half of it is a bison ranch, and the other half was a guest operation.
Okay, cool. So I listened to a podcast you're on. It's Mountain and Prairie, hosted by Ed Roberson, and he did quite a deep dive on you, like coming
Yeah.
in Colorado. And can you tell us a little bit about your trial by fire stints on those ranches where you learn how to ride and move cattle and bison and all that fun stuff? I thought it was like a super cool story.
Yeah, it was. The opportunity presented to me is one that I'm eternally grateful for, and wouldn't be where I am today without it. The group Ranchlands, run by Duke Phillips, are initially based out of Colorado, took on young, interested individuals who had very little, if any, experience in agriculture or particularly ranching, and took them on and taught them how to work on working ranches. And so I came out to Colorado as an intern technically, and was basically given a horse, given a saddle, and told we're riding out in 30 minutes, be ready to go. Uh, Very fortunate that right before I moved to Colorado, while I was in North Carolina, I had a friend who had a horse farm and gave me a crash course on all things horses. And fortunately, at least got up to a lope. I felt all right at a trot, which was important because that's all we did was trot around the ranch. And that first day, I think we did over 30 miles, about 8 hours in the saddle, and I was sore in ways I had never experienced, and learned a lot about technique and form and just your gear too. I went out and bought some new boots, and immediately had a friend to give me some chaps, and uh, yeah, it was trial by fire for sure.
Um, what's it like moving bison? I mean, are they, do they, and maybe this is a stupid question, but are they very similar to moving cows, or like, I mean, do you have to handle them differently?
So the herd we were running was what we considered a wild conservation herd, and so we didn't really handle them all but once a year when we had to process them and preg check and tag new ones and cull the herd if necessary. The ranch, like I said, was 103,000 acres, but the pasture that we kept them in was one single pasture of 50,000 acres, and I think it had a 35-mile perimeter fence. And they really were self-managed, and they kind of pulled up in different pods of about a few hundred, and I think we were running 2,500 total. And so you would see a few hundred here and then a few hundred on the other side of the pasture and then another group. So they kind of did their own thing. But there was that once a year when we'd have to gather them up. And with that, we used, small airplanes, helicopters, dirt bikes,
Uh,
horseback. Things got really Western in that. Um, I've had to move bison a few times just to get them to different areas. And when you're moving several hundred head of bison, you just see this wall of brown butts. And then all of a sudden, like you would see one coming at you, one pissed off mama, and then you have to very quickly break off because they run tremendously fast. So you have to constantly be paying attention because when they come at you, it's no joke for sure.
oh gosh, I mean, I've had, heifers come at me, and I can't imagine what it's like to have a bison come at me, on horseback.
Yeah.
How are the horses with them?
Horses were great. This herd of horses we had out there uh, were very used to them, would stand their ground, and were pretty smart. And the bison were pretty used to seeing people on horseback as well. So you have to kind of find that balance of how much pressure to put on them. Because again, just like cattle, they're a prey animal. And if you start chasing them, they're going to feel that threat.
Yeah. Well, I can only imagine, I mean, how magical they must be to kind of be in, I mean, the symbol of the American West, right? And to be part of that, it must be like a religious experience, I have to imagine, right?
Every day waking up, knowing you got to go out in the pasture and just watch them. I mean, I was working on different projects, and so would constantly be seeing them out there. And even they'd be literally in my flower beds outside of the place I lived. I lived in a barn, and if it wasn't for the screens in the windows, I'd be able to pet them because they were like literally eating everything around the facility there. So it was awe-inspiring. Like I said, I would never ever replace that experience in my life. I without a doubt can say I would not be where I am today without my time at both Chico Basin Ranch and the Mendoza Zapata Ranch.
Wow. Okay. So while you're down there, you apply for a job and you get
Yeah.
the job at Aspen Valley Land Trust as their steward director. Do you want to tell the story of how you got that job? Because it is funny, although it probably is not funny for the people who didn't get the job.
It was comical. So I had a whole previous career working for land trust back east, doing nonprofit land conservation, and so I had experience in applying for these types of jobs, and I had a cover letter written up, and my resume was dialed because I was ready to be looking for the next thing, and saw this job opportunity in Carbondale, Colorado. Saw it was in the Aspen Valley. I'd heard of Aspen, didn't know much about it. Um, and so I was out one night. I was actually back east visiting some friends for some reason. And we went out and had a couple drinks, and I was talking about this job, and they're like, "Oh, you should apply." And so literally 30 minutes before the deadline, I kind of made some quick edits and maybe had a drink or two in me, coming back from hanging out with friends, and click send, and woke up the next morning to it. Hey, congrats. We're excited to invite you to first round of interviews. And so that was unexpected, but very, very welcomed. And then, was back in Colorado, back on the ranch after that vacation, and came up to Carbondale and interviewed, and uh, had a wonderful time. I think it was 120 applicants is what I was told, and then four of us were selected for finalists. And of the four, all of us had advanced degrees, but I was the only one who had actual ranch experience. So that time, like I said, working at Chico and Mendo were paramount to my career development.
Wow. I mean, it's always that case of, when you look in the rearview mirror, how life kind of works out for you. But so what does the stewardship director do there, and how do you think it has set you up for your solopreneur experience?
Yeah, so the Aspen Valley Land Trust at the time was about to turn 50 years old. They're the oldest land trust doing private land conservation in the state of Colorado. It was founded, I think, in 1967. So now, excuse me, at the time, there were over 170 properties that they have conserved, and their service area is from Independence Pass, the Continental Divide, all the way down through the Roaring Fork Valley, turn left towards Grand Junction, all the way down to Debec. So a service area, I think the size of Connecticut, or twice the size of Connecticut, something like that. It's noteworthy. And they had 170 properties conserved. Now it's much more than that. It's over 50,000 acres. But my job as stewardship director was to steward those properties, to make sure that all of the agreements that landowners had entered into with the land trust were being upheld. So that way, limited development was happening. They weren't breaking any of the rules. They were taking care of the land in a way that promoted conservation values. So a large part of my job was to just make sure that the legal agreements were being upheld. And the best way to do that is through intentional personal relations.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time out walking the ranch, riding in a side by side, sitting around the kitchen table, whether it was drinking tea or lemonade, and which was fun. It was great. But ultimately, what I wanted to do was advise landowners on how to better manage their land. That's the reason I went to graduate school. That's the reason I came west. And so, through some really intentional conversations, we had decided it's time for me to move on. And so I very quickly started reaching out to my network and had a job offer in like 2 or 3 days with what I thought was a dream job. And it was doing ranch management advising across the West. They advised land management for over 8 million acres or something like that. So very extensive. And so I was starting to tell landowners here what I was going to be doing. And immediately some of them said, well, can you help us with some projects? So I started developing my own client load, and thought to myself very naively, well, why don't I just do this on my own? So as far as being an entrepreneur, especially a solopreneur, that was not my intention. I have no experience in that. My family is all civil servants, never really grew up around it. So I just literally jumped in the deep end of the pool and had no idea what I was getting into. But here we are 10 years later, still in business, still advising landowners, now working all across the nation on some great projects.
Well, your company's called Resiliency Lands. And do you want to maybe give us an elevator pitch on what a typical day is like for you. And maybe also, especially maybe talk about Sunfire Ranch, because that's quite a fascinating project that you undertook, right?
Yeah. So Resiliency Lands, like I said, I started in March 2016, and in the resource management realm, resiliency is the ability for ecosystem or a setting to be able to withstand and bounce back from disturbance. Disturbance is a natural part of ecology, especially out here in the West. We've got avalanches, we've got wildfires, we've got drought. We need to be able to manage our lands so that way we're accounting for these disturbances and emulating those disturbances when necessary through, like, say, prescribed fire, um, drought mitigation. Um, and so that's why I decided to name my company Resiliency Lands, because I wanted to create a resilient landscape for my clients, both ecologically but also economically, so that way their operations would be able to withstand any disturbance, whether it was environmental or market or otherwise. Um, Couple projects were kind of small, just figuring it out, and then Sunfire Ranch very quickly came on my radar, and we developed a partnership and ended up working with them for 6 years. It's a ranch that I hold very near and dear to my heart. The family's been ranching that property for over 125 years now, and I think they were the first white settlers in the Crystal Valley, and they really wanted to conserve the not just the landscape, but the heritage and the culture of the Crystal Valley and the the area around Carbondale. And so I worked with them to really develop a 125-year plan. The ranch was 125 years old. We wanted to think the next 125 years out. What are every and any possible economic opportunities we'd want to do, from farm to table dinners to weddings to growing the farming operation to multi-species rotational grazing, all the things. And so we really developed a very comprehensive, I can't remember, maybe 150-page document that really showcased all these potential drivers to keep the ranch in business. And then we ultimately were able to execute on a conservation easement, which Pickens County paid them handsomely to essentially not develop their property. And here we are now, a few years later. They're kind of up and running and doing their thing, and they've got a whole team in place. And ultimately, that's my goal, is to come in and work for a year or a few years and set people on the right track and then step away. So to me, that was a great success story.
Well, it's such a coincidence because I think I mentioned to you I'm actually going there tomorrow. I haven't actually had the privilege of going there before, so tomorrow I got invited there, and I'm super excited to see kind of all the things, all the things.
It's a special place.
A special place, yeah. I used to actually live down the road from there, so I really feel that. Firefighting, fire mitigation is a big part of you and your family's background. You said civil servant, but really, it's firefighting's in your family. Can you tell us more, since obviously that's a huge topic for us in this valley?
Yeah. So growing up, essentially my whole family were firefighters. My dad, my brother, two of my uncles, and my cousin were all structural municipal firefighters. And so naturally, everyone asked me, "Oh, are you going to follow in their footsteps and become a firefighter?" Well, intriguing, it wasn't what was really pulling at my heartstring. I really did enjoy the environment. We were fortunate that pretty much most of our family vacations were road trips to state parks or national parks. I grew up right down the road from Cuyahoga Valley National Park. So I was really drawn to the natural environment and being a steward of it. That being said, after graduating with my first degree in undergrad in environmental science, I had the opportunity to be trained as a wildland firefighter. And particularly, it was doing prescribed fire, reintroducing wildfire onto the land to manage it ecologically, in an ecologically appropriate way. And so that was very appealing to me. Setting things on fire is is fun for anyone, but a young guy who's got this whole career or life of being told don't play with matches. Now I get to play with matches. So it was amazing. And by the time my tenure as a wildland firefighter in the South ended, I think I had chalked up over 50 prescribed fires and many thousands of acres, and learned a lot. And so I was very fortunate too then, when I was in graduate school studying forestry and fire ecology, that my master's thesis was developing a restoration and fire management plan for a newly acquired nature conservancy property in North Carolina. And we were actually implementing my plan as we went, as I was writing it. So I was able to dictate how we were going to use fire, go out there, use it, and then use that feedback to tweak my plan. So it was a very, real case of what we call adaptive management. And as far as I know, that plan is still in use. So my goal was to create some sort of document or a plan that wouldn't just sit on a shelf, that would actually impact the land. And I'm very proud that that was the case. So did that. Then that was, I think, 2011, 2012, came to Colorado, not knowing that we were embarking on one of the worst fire seasons in the history of Colorado. 2012 was like 2002, and then 2012 broke records multiple times. And I showed up all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed saying, well, when are we going to do prescribed fire? How do we get fire on the ground? And it was a big no, shh, we don't talk about that, because everything was burning at the time. Prescribed fires had gotten out of control. There were some structures and houses lost. So that's the unfortunate, negative side of trying to do good. And so looking back at the South, there was so much uh, benefit that we had with the different humidity and the different terrain. We had amazing partnerships with Department of Defense, Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, state agencies, and you're starting to see that develop here, but not the same as we saw in the South. And so I've been fortunate to be involved with uh, some groups, some roundtables that are working on collaborative efforts, because it really, that's what it takes to get the job done out here, and especially working with private landowners. So, while I would say I'm mostly retired as a firefighter now, I try and stay in good enough shape if I need to go out and give a hand, I can.
That's great. I mean, we're obviously going into a very dry season ourselves. We had a mild winter, but we're really lucky to have people like you and all the other firefighters in our valley. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you. And I will say, going into this season, this drought this prolonged drought and very, very serious drought, I'm very pleased with a lot of these landowners right now that are taking efforts to mitigate for the risk. I don't know if I've told you this, but I was on the incident management team for the Lake Christine fire in Basalt in 2018. And that was right in our face. Like, our whole community saw it, and what those firefighters were able to accomplish with the burnout on the blow up the night of July 4th, 2018 was nothing short of a miracle. I mean, quick thinking, very, very intentional, thoughtful practices. And I'm very proud of the community that came out to support the firefighters. And I would say the biggest thing you could do to support firefighters is take the time to make your home safe. Reduce the risk that a firefighter would be exposed to if they have to come to your house to protect it from a wildfire. Because, I don't want me or any of my buddies to roll up to a house and try and defend it if it was a high risk to us, if we maybe it would be difficult to get out of, or the fire behavior would be too extreme to, be mindful of our safety. So I will implore anyone listening here across the West, be very, thoughtful about where you live and how you can make your house as safe as possible and appealing to firefighters to want to save it safely.
Yeah, it's called defensible spaces. And for any listener that listens in, the firefighters will come to your house and they'll do a full inspection. give you this really cool report. I had it done last year, and I got an A plus. So anyhow,
Love it.
last time Conan and I met, we like riff for hours. But he mentioned a book to me that I think really put moving forward with this podcast over the edge. And I mentioned this book in my opening podcast. The book is called Billionaire Wilderness. This book made me cry. It made me want to throw up. It made me so angry. I had such a visceral reaction to this book. I listened to it while I was hiking, while I was driving. And if you saw me during that time, I looked like a mad person because it affected me so much. And I think part of it is because this book has such a huge parallel to what's happening in our valley. And maybe you can give the cliff notes on this book, because if I do, I'm going to be all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say your response is very similar to many other people that I know of who've read that book. It's a complicated read. It's covers a lot of different subjects. Like you said, evokes a lot of different emotions. So for those that haven't had a chance to read it, it's written by Justin Farrell, who's a professor out of Yale, but was born and raised in Wyoming and outside or near the Jackson Hole area. And basically, it's a case study on Jackson Hole, both environmentally and socioeconomically. Um, Jackson Hole or Jackson is a very unique area, and it's literally this hole in the public lands, and so very limited opportunity for economic development or residential development and the associated economic development. So what we've seen is that the people that get to live in Jackson tend to be the ultra wealthy that can afford the real estate or the ranches that are in the surrounding area. Much of the working class has to come in from outside of the hole, from other even states, from Idaho to Montana to other parts of Wyoming, to service the economy there. They talk about how it's essentially a barbell-shaped economy where you have on one end an existing low income working class. You have almost no middle class because they can't afford it and they don't have the subsidies available to them to be able to procure housing. And then on the other end of the barbell, you have the ultra wealthy. Throughout the book, the author interviews, I think, over 200 high net worth individuals, a lot of them landowners, and gets their perspective on being an owner of land and also a part of the community. And then conversely, he also interviews many of the working class individuals and gets their take on the situation and also their perception of the ultra wealthy in this landscape. And so it's very fascinating both how the high net worth people viewed themselves as part of the community and as stewards of the land. And a lot of them acknowledge some of the, I don't want to say evil, but not good that they had to do to create wealth to be able to afford the real estate and want to kind of make up for it through different reparations and involvement in the community. And a lot of that is supporting conservation. But a lot of opportunities are missed out that the lower socioeconomic class members aren't attended to. So housing for low income individuals, daycare, education, all that stuff is very challenging. So it's a fascinating book. It's a case study. Even though it's Jackson, it can be applied to Aspen, to Telluride, to Sun Valley, to Mammoth, to you name it, mountain town in the West. I'd say the biggest takeaway, though, the train has left the station. Land is changing hands.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. Charlie, you're in real estate. You understand just this trend, and ranches and farms are going to be moving towards the ultra wealthy, and my job, and those individuals and families tend to be my clientele. My job is to obviously help them meet their objective as a landowner, which typically is recreation, whether it's hunting, fishing, leisure time with their family, um, but also be a good member of the community, help them integrate and be respectful of their neighbors, get to know their neighbors, support the local rodeo or the local 4-H or FFA. Um, so while the book is definitely visceral and can really pull on a lot of heartstrings, I think it's a good warning or just a wake up for both the people owning land and the people in these communities. We all have to work together, and we're all out here because we love a certain way of life and a beautiful landscape. There's no denying that.
Yeah.
But we, if we're not being thoughtful and working collaboratively, we're going to love this place to death, and we're going to make it so exclusive that it's not viable anymore. Um, so I totally understand your, because I've had the emotional response too, but it's the reality that we live in, and I think as lovers of the land and stewards of this culture and this environment, the best that we can do is welcome these people as neighbors and try and educate them and try and understand them, and that's a large part of why I enjoy doing what I do as a land management advisor.
Yeah. Um, my neighbor, they service like 6 or 8 sort of Uber luxury homes in Woody Creek. And in fact, I suggested the book to her, and she had a very similar reaction. The reality is that, we service these billionaires, we sell properties to them, you consult to them, it's such a hard line to walk, and sometimes it's a daily struggle. And I know most of us in this valley really feel it and get really upset about it. I know you're a big fan of Ted Turner, and I can't believe he left the world yesterday. Very sad moment. When I was growing up, and I'm older than you, um, all I knew about Ted Turner was he was this big media mogul and his horrible divorce with Jane Fonda, and she made him out to be a very evil man. But Ted Turner has turned out to be a huge conservationist and very pivotal in the preservation of the American bison. And he has opened up his land to the general public to enjoy, and is defying this whole idea that billionaires squander and conserve the land, excluding communities from really enjoying it, whether it be hiking, biking, horseback riding, hunting. Um, so I know you're a big fan of him, and so am I for that very reason.
Yeah, I know, very sad day yesterday. I think a lot of us that, follow his doings, knew his health was in decline, and we're expecting this at some point. Regardless, it's still very sad, and I'm very pleased that there's been so much media attention given to his passing, but also his life and all that he accomplished, whether it's in advertising and media and creating the 24-hour news cycle to, for better or for worse, um, winning various sailing cups. But I think his biggest legacy is as a landowner and as a conservationist. And he is, without a doubt, and I've said this many times over the years, the reason I got into the work I do. Uh, I really thought that I would go to work, say with the Park Service or the Forest Service. Very quickly found that there's a lot of red tape, and it's very hard to implement progressive management on public lands. But then learning about what Ted Turner had done, not only in funding the acquisition of land, but the stewardship of it as well. And he put his dollars to work restoring cattle ranches into bison ranches, creating the Turner Endangered Species Fund, passing all of this ethos on to his kids, whether it's Bo or Ted or Laura. I know he's got a few others. They're all very involved with environmental stewardship. Same with his grandkids. Um, But I think the one takeaway that people really need to think about is he also did this in a very market-driven capitalist way. So many people don't know this, but the bison was on the verge of extinction just over 100 years ago. Uh, Another hero of mine, Theodore Roosevelt, and some others brought it back from about 500 to 1,000 animals left in the wild, brought them back to where we are now. I mean, these numbers used to range from anywhere from 30 to 90 million head of bison roaming wild across North America. So for it to go down to 500 or 1,000 is just crazy to think that we can do that. And that's a whole nother conversation. But Ted wanted to restore this majestic creature to the landscape. Um, And part of how he did it was to create a market outlet for it. And he created Ted's Montana Grill, which was a restaurant chain that has now quickly expanded across the country. And it provided the general public the opportunity to taste bison because most people haven't. And so, because he did that and created a demand for bison, other ranchers and farmers across the country were able to develop and raise their own herds because of the market outlet that Ted Turner created. So I think he was a visionary in how he did it. He put his money where his mouth is, and like you said, is opening up his properties to different activities. I was very fortunate. A few years ago, I was recruited to apply to be the assistant general manager at his Vermejo Park Ranch down in New Mexico, which I thought was a dream job. It was, but I also realized I really enjoy the work I'm doing and being able to service a multitude of landowners and not just focus on one property. So that's kind of also why I've committed to resiliency lands and not being a ranch manager on any single property. So that's my very long-winded way of saying Ted Turner was very inspirational, had a tremendous impact on ranching and agriculture and conservation in this country and beyond. And I really hope his legacy is continued by not just his family, but people like myself and so many others that looked up to him.
Well, you want to know something wild? I just realized that this is the coaster from his restaurant that I have on my desk, and I've had it for years.
Really?
So Ted is with us today.
Ted is with us.
Talking, and I'm looking down. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So as you can see, Connor and I have a lot in common. We've both connected from our love of education. Connor has 3 degrees, 2 masters. I have 2, 1 master. But we're both really passionate about preserving our Western heritage in this valley. I know you've encouraged me to do the King Ranch certification, which I'm super excited for, but that's next May. What is Connor Coleman's next steps? What's happening with you?
Man, what is next? I just last month took a 2-week road trip around Texas. I try and do that every few years. What I have found is there's a lot of Texans moving to not just Colorado, but the Intermountain West, and they come here and buy land and say, well, we want to run it like how we do in Texas or how our neighbor does it. So I had this, I quite often have to say to them, well, you're not in Texas. We have a very different environment, a very different landscape, very different politics. And so spending time down there continues to give me perspective on what they're aspiring to do and how we can adapt implementation of management to meet their goals. Also would love to pick up some projects in Texas. I think there's so much potential down there. It's a state that's over, I want to say 97% private land. So tremendous amount of potential versus, here in our valley, Pickens County is 85% public land, 15% private land. It's very, very different.
Yeah.
So, Texas has been on my mind. Pretty sure there's a country song about that. But so Texas is of interest. Education, I'm always, going to be reading, trying to educate myself. We saw a lot during COVID, the demand for the utilization of outdoor spaces for gatherings. It was mandated we had to be outside. So farm to table dinners and weddings and things like that really came on my radar. And while I'm not interested in being a wedding planner, I do really appreciate uh, the conversation that happens around a dinner table, especially on a ranch where the food is grown. And so over the past few years, I've worked with some chefs to develop these opportunities and help ranchers create them as well and figure out the logistics. So I would love to continue to marry the conversation around cuisine with what that means regarding land stewardship. So, whether it's live fire cooking or working with chefs, um, that's very much of interest and on the front burner in my mind.
Oh, that's so exciting. Really, I think obviously farm to table is our roots, like literally and figuratively. So that's super exciting. Wow, it's been such a pleasure, Connor. I mean, we are so lucky to have somebody like you bring, uh, just your knowledge, your thoughts, and obviously your contributions to the Valley. I know you've obviously been on the board of the Bureau of Land Management, BLM. You've 5 Point Film Festival. You've also served on a steering committee for fire mitigation. Um, I have a very not so well and not so usual question for you to finish off with. Um, as the audience is probably going to realize, I'm a serial podcast listener, very avid listener. I really love learning about all different things in my world. And I recently listened to this podcast by David Huberman, and it was on male roles, obligations, and options for building a fulfilling life with Scott Galloway. He's also a professor. I know you're into fitness. You have multiple degrees. You're a firefighter, a cowboy, a volunteer. Um, what is your advice for men of your age and obviously younger in this valley, in a world where we are increasingly becoming slaves to our phones and computers? My son went to CRMS, such a great school. He also went on to do a degree in environmental science like you. Um, but CRMS really opened him up to become more of a well-rounded um, member of society, I would say. And in this day and age, it's kind of hard to find people like him and you, well-rounded, you know. And so, what advice can you give to listeners about being kind of a real man in the modern digital world, and also navigating navigating a community of very strong women and cowgirls like me?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question, and uh, one that is becoming more and more challenging to answer anymore. I have different thoughts on this, but the first one that I'm going to emphasize, the most is ask for help in any capacity. I think uh, in this false narrative of becoming a manly man, you have to do it all on your own, whether it's, be successful in your career, your health, your mental health, being part of your community, your family, that it's all on you. But I've definitely learned once I've started asking for help, whether it's, building out a team for my business, or, working with mental health experts, or professionals to help me with career advice, mentors, mentee, working with mentees too. Um, I have been able to grow by leaps and bounds because of that. So that is as cliche as it might be, I would say, asking for help, but also being part of the community. We are communal creatures. It's funny because I knew you were asking me this, and I have a bunch of notes on my phone, but I have my phone turned off, so I'm not able to pull it up. But I think, constantly educating yourself, reading. I just picked up the book Range about how generalists are succeeding more in a world that's so focused on specialists. And so being able to do things for fun, for leisure, to challenge your mind. I just started playing chess a couple months ago. just because I wanted to, and it's been a great challenge learning new languages, listening. You know, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And statistically, it shows that in a conversation, the person who talks 49% or less in a conversation is more impactful in that dialogue. So listen, be curious, ask questions. Um, I understand the irony of it as I'm rambling here, but I think that if you're able to ask for help, ask questions, be curious, you're going to be the best possible version of yourself. And I did listen to that podcast episode of Huberman and Galloway, and really enjoyed the conversation, not just because it was relative, but because they disagreed in some points. And I think that is another, especially in this day and age, in this political climate, this economy, have conversations with people you disagree with. Have open-minded conversations. You don't have to agree with them, but to have that validation for what they say, and curiosity to figure out how they got there. Once I started changing my perspective, I can't tell you the wonderful people I've met uh, across the spectrum, the political spectrum,
Mm.
the the economic spectrum, the geographic range. And so that curiosity is the biggest thing. And also then, I mean, I'll also say just taking care of yourself, working out, being active, moving. We all underappreciate that, especially as you get older. Like I need to tell myself, my watch tells me, go get up. It's like, shit, I've been sitting that long. I need to get up. So I know you asked earlier, what's a day in the life of me? I'm on the phone all the time, making relations and maintaining relations, and which is important, but also get up and move and reflect and take time for yourself. So, um, and then lastly, I'll say this might be or taboo, but especially in the ag community, in these rural communities, there is this how do I say it? This kind of conversation on understanding and respecting uh, both male and female roles in the community. There's some great groups like Women in Ranching, Artemis Sports Women, a lot of different groups out there supporting women in this industry and in this way of life. Uh, when I first heard about them, I was like, well, what the hell? Why do these exist? You know, we can't have a men in ranching. And the response I got from women was, that's just called ranching. And I'm very grateful for those conversations that are being had, and not just the safe spaces that women have to gather, but for me to be curious and be like, why do they need this? And then now that I have a better understanding, how I support it, because we all need each other to advance this. And at the end of the day, especially here in the Roaring Fork Valley, in Western Colorado, in the American West, we are trying to maintain and conserve a lifestyle. I'm not saying we can't change and evolve, but we're trying to maintain and promote environmental stewardship and heritage, and be the reason that people want to come out here, whether it's for a visit or for the rest of their lives. And so I think at the end of the day, being part of a community and knowing that you are one of many is the best thing you could do as an individual, especially as a man or a young man in this space.
Yeah. Well, speaking to the woman part of it, I mean that's why I wrote cowgirl poetry. I mean, we hear about cowboy everything, but women hold up half the sky here. We do 50%. And I'm fortunate to be surrounded by really strong cowgirls. And that's again coming to this theme of this podcast. We really want to highlight everyone in this valley who's contributing to our Western heritage. I mean, you and I have talked about a lot about this before this podcast, but what sets Western culture apart is that people are very respectful and open to you, um, as long as you respect the environment and the culture. I think that's huge. We also have talked about the fact of earning the right to wear a cowboy hat, you know, not just to go and buy it at Kimasabi. I think these things are super important on where we live. And lastly, for those of you who do not know this, because this happened to Connor, is never, ever go up to a cowboy and touch his hat, or for a cowgirl for that matter. That's a big no-no. So to finish off, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, I'd really appreciate you following me and giving me a good rating, because that's how the whole algorithm works, and sharing this with your friends. And if you think there's somebody I should interview, then please reach out. My contact is in the show notes, and I'll also put Connor's contacts in the show notes so you could reach out to him. I'm so grateful to have spent this time with you, Connor, especially. Obviously, it's timely. We lost Ted yesterday. So here's to you, Ted Turner.
Here's
And
to Ted.
here's to Ted. Giddy up, everybody, and be well. This podcast was brought to you by One Chick Cowgirl Productions, keeping the Wild West alive.